TX Juice AI stunt drone. I bought this from Sainsbury's, which is a supermarket here in the UK, for about £15 on Boxing Day. It was supposed to be about £40, that's 40, so that was an amazing discount because it was Boxing Day. But as you can see, it didn't really last long. But I think I know how to fix it. The reason that I wanted to share this video is because I think the thing that went wrong with it is probably something which is likely to go wrong with a lot of micro drones like this. I think that it's very likely that these sort of things are going to be cloned or based on a very common sort of design. But there is one major weakness with it which I found. Obviously, if you never crash it, then you're never going to see this problem, but you're going to crash it multiple times, I can guarantee. I'm going to show you how I actually disassembled it in a second. I didn't film that process because I didn't think that I was actually going to be able to fix it, but now it looks likely that it is fixed. I think the weakest part of this design was this point right here. So that component, so having those tweezers, was mounted between those two solder pads, and it has tiny thin wires on the edges, which were the only things actually directly soldered to those pads. So that made it a very weak solder joint, so they had just hot glued that component onto the board as well. And as I know very well, hot glue becomes brittle over time. It's quite brittle anyway, so it doesn't stand up well to shocks. And so that component just jumped straight off the board, and the whole drone stopped working. So this isn't BigClive.com or anything, so I'm not entirely sure what function this had in the circuit, but I believe that it's just being used as an inductor. It's just a tiny core which appears to be iron wrapped in copper wire. This is an extreme macro shot of that inductor or choke. I took this photo showing how I achieved this shot. I was actually filming through a magnifying glass. But you can see there's the end of one of the wires sticking out on the coil, and then on the other side of the choke there's a wire coming out from the kind of the inside of the coil winding. And what I'm trying to do there is use a very small screwdriver to kind of free that wire up a little bit and make it possible to solder onto. Now you can imagine how small that wire is, so soldering was incredibly difficult, but I did manage to do it in the end. Well, this video is all a bit backwards, but before I go any further, I'm going to show you how I took the drone to pieces before I actually got to find this choke component. They have anti-clockwise and clockwise propellers on this, so you need to get those in the right order. So all I did when I was taking the drone to pieces, I noticed that the propellers have either A2 or B2 written on them. So while I was taking the drone to pieces, I just wrote on the diagram which went where on the drone. The propellers are tightly friction fitted to the motor shafts, so I needed to use the pliers to pull on the shaft of the propeller. Then they came off quite easy. I used a tiny screwdriver to remove the propeller guards. Just had to pry out the clips like that. Next I removed the 4 screws in the bottom of the frame, and then I unclipped the clips next to the motors and removed the bottom of the plastic body. Then I was able to lift up the top parts of the plastic body and get access to the part of the circuit board where the choke needed to be soldered to. I placed the choke across the two pads that it had become detached from. As I described earlier on, one end of the wire wrapped around it needs to be soldered to one of the pads and the other end to the other pad. But this was extremely difficult. I had to heat up the choke first to try to get the solder close to melting points. Then first I melted one pad, managed to get one of the wires soldered to it, more by luck than anything else. And then I somehow managed to get the soldering iron around the back and build up enough solder on the other pads to catch the other wire. So I think that finally worked. I managed to solder one broken wire from the inductor to one soldering pad, and then another broken wire from the inductor to the other solder pad, and that seems to be staying on for a long time now. When I just bridged these, this would only stay on at maximum power for a few seconds, so I think that the inductor or choke was part of some kind of power sensing circuit on the battery, which would make sense. I'm just going to hot glue the choke down while it's switched on so I can just check that it still works, and then attach the cover back onto this. That was how the choke was originally held to the circuit board, except with a far smaller blob of hot glue. So I hope that this is going to be a bit more secure this time. So that's hopeful. Hopefully it will still work when I reassemble the drone. So I almost got the bottom cover on, and lights are still flashing, which is a great sign. So there's a bit of soldering iron melting going on here, but considering how delicate that job was, I think it went pretty well. So this is the moment of truth. It's reassembled and the lights are on. I'm just going to try to pair it with the controller. That's hopeful. So let's see if I overcome that problem with the power limiting. Well, I crashed it already, but it's still working. One thing I'll say about this drone, it's not that easy to fly, which is why I keep crashing it in the first place. I'd say this is very definitely fixed. One thing I've noticed about it is it's so small that if you fly it too close to something, the updraft will actually suck the drone into the surface. Like that. I'm not actually using any controls, this is just the draft holding the drone onto my hand. Fixed. Well, I hope you found that little drone autopsy and revival interesting. If you think you might find this video useful, please do like, subscribe for more open source electronics, kind of makery sort of stuff. I make videos about Arduinos, including the obligatory Arduino watering system. I modified a Chinese laser cutter to run on G-code. I started using that to make laser cut marquetry. I also made a blog about building my own CNC machine from scratch using acrylic sheets and the open build C-beam system. So there's a whole playlist which will kind of show you the process, and all of the designs for that CNC machine are available for you to download, and you can make your own. I used that CNC machine to engrave some veneer to create a replica of the puzzle box from the Hellraiser series of films, which was my entry for the Instructables Halloween contest this year. There's a lot of miscellaneous stuff on my channel, but if you're into maker stuff, you're probably going to find it interesting to subscribe. I'm really happy that I breached the 500 subscriber mark before the end of 2016, and I'm really looking forward to see what this new year brings.